Started.
Great. Good morning. Yeah, everyone's in the same time zone for a change. So good morning, all. How's everyone doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
I'll add myself.
Yeah, please tag in here and how are you feeling? And then I'll be honest, I'm feeling a little Zoom fatigued. Uh, I'm not sure if you all are doing the same, but been on a lot of Zoom calls. I was actually kind of with that in mind, hoping to do more of a working session, talk through things, and feel like we're getting some stuff done as we were doing it. Um, but
Yeah.
that said, if there's stuff to talk about, let's do that beforehand.
No, I am all for. I mean, if you want to kind of task us out and then we return back in 30 minutes or so, if that's what your plan was, I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah, no, I was thinking we could hang out on here, be muted. There are open PRs, and again, being newer to the crowd here, it would be interesting to talk through, especially your perspective, Matt. On we've got two community proposed metrics from people I don't recognize, so it's kind of cool. They followed along and wanted to participate, so figured it's worth a review. It
Is
looks
that
like,
the last two here?
yeah, the last two. It looks
Okay.
like, not sure if Kevin's gonna come back in. And Kevin proposed a question on PR 77 that uh, left me thinking of where the bounds of metrics versus methodologies really works in this group. And yeah, I'd like to get some perspective there.
Okay.
Cool. Uh, Vinod, how are you doing?
Headphone fatigue.
Yeah, good.
I'm not used to using the headphones at all.
No, kind of a new setup for you.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like we're all going to be semi-professional podcasters by the end of this pandemic. Like all the ins and outputs and having at least a microphone or two.
You're probably right, actually.
Yeah. One of the funniest tweets that keeps coming true for me is that, one of the highest risks for people living at home right now is that they may start a podcast, especially for men in their mid 30s. So please watch out for this very dangerous behavior at a very difficult time for people.
That's hilarious.
Hey, King. Hits home as I've started to since this all happened. Hi, King. Welcome back. How are you doing?
King, feel free to add your name and how you're doing to the minutes.
Great. And yeah, Kevin dropped, but that is sweet. I'll just share my
Be
screen.
having tech.
Start walking.
And Matt too. I mean, I'll say that on these meetings as you're running them, I think we're all kind of feeling Zoom fatigue. So I mean, like I said, if you want to kind of be creative on how this is run, I mean, 100% fine. So there's no like chaos requirement that we have a video session for an hour.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I'll full disclaimer. This is a small group anyway, so I think we'll keep this pretty tight. And if we can work through the open items and any backlog, um, you know, I think it's just so fun to talk through value. But I will say, like, I think with things in progress, it seems a little stalled. So I think going through what's actually there will be helpful to see, like, okay, how do we get unstuck?
So I guess I do have one thing for you. It's not even that needs to be resolved today, Matt, but
Yeah.
something perhaps for you to think about, which was if we want to kind of systematically approach OSPOs,
Mm.
to like open source program offices, to get a better handle on value as ascribed. Um, I think I'm guessing I may have some funds this year that we could use to run, say, a professional survey, to whatever it might be. And so I know we had talked about the surveys with Vinod,
Yeah.
and Lawrence a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a good,
Basically,
I did a one-on-one with
yeah.
Lawrence because because it kind of got me thinking and about sorry, where are you going with that, Matt?
Well, no, it's just my budgets are kind of having to be shifted around because of travel.
Mm-hmm.
Like naturally, I'm not going to be spending as much on travel.
Right. Right.
So the so kind of the way that I fund things is through grants, just personally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so those grants are kind of written in the spirit of CHAOSS as a whole.
Yeah.
And so, like, as I can't travel, I still have the dollars, right? And those dollars can be kind of aimed at ways of scaling the project, and that scale can be at with particular working groups. That scale can be with software.
Mm.
We have a little bit of latitude here, so I'm just maybe something to think about. That if you have thoughts on what steps might be needed to help scale this work, um, we may have some dollars.
Cool. That's excellent to know. Um, yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on that. I'll think on that. I'll throw out there that the biggest thing about value that we tend to seem to be circling around, and I think it'll be best explored by example in the pull request of like what metrics make sense in this space, um, and once I have a better pattern of what ones make sense and what needs to change, either in the current ones or in future ones, then to that I can pattern match from there of like, okay, we're circling this idea of value.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then like there's been a request for kind of focus areas in here. I want to review the proposal and conclusion that we had on that, because I think it kind of lands in a place where I'm like, that one, at least the first proposal, isn't useful in my opinion, and I proposed it, so I don't feel any like any malice towards saying that, and I'm okay with that. I kind of think like the really special thing about value to me is that, um, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's unique in the sense of it's trying to capture this idea of a company investment, while so many of our other metrics are very project and individual focused. Um, and I want to honor that idea and find enough of these where you could say like, here's a definitive playbook if you're an OSPO of like some of the best ways in which people are measuring, and maybe some tools that will help you get there, like some tips to do it. But like, if you're about to spin up an OSPO, I want people to come to this repo, copy a metric and get going, right? Like, and I don't know, like I've been looking more into To Do Group, and To Do Group has these kind of structured playbooks. So I guess I'm questioning right now, like whether is my mind in a place where like, ironically, am I adding value to the value group by trying to pursue metrics, or is my goal better suited from like trying to parrot, or I mean mimic or complement the work from To Do Group, with their kind of playbook structure? Does that make sense?
It does. I think you had kind of two things
Yeah.
going there. Like on one hand, it's the development of metrics,
Yeah.
right? They help elicit value. And I think the second is the process by which those metrics find meaning.
Yeah.
in OSPOs. And naturally they're related, but I think they're kind of two things you were talking about there.
Yeah, that's really helpful to separate those. Thank you.
And I mean, my contention, so part of what we always do in the CHAOSS project is one, what are the metrics that are meaningful? Full stop,
Yeah.
right? The second is in the CHAOSS project, metrics alone aren't useful to anybody just by themselves, like sitting on a web page. Yep. And so then how do we bring those metrics to have meaning in the world? And so an example that we're working on is like the D&I badging program. And so diversity and inclusion has come up with a series of metrics that are relevant for events. And those metrics by themselves are great, but the badging program is a process by which those metrics can have meaning in the world. So I think that's what you're talking about here.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we're still working from like we need to have the raw bits to add it, and then like we can figure out the playbook for them. But
I agree.
That's actually really good. All right. With that in mind, I think go back to sharing and take you from there. Let's dive right in. Yeah.
I'll continue kind of on that funding. So the funding can be potentially be used to help identify what those raw bits are.
Okay.
Or the funding could potentially be used to help develop the playbook by which those raw bits are put in front of people. Yep. I mean, I have to be real honest. Listening to talk too. So I'm kind of in love with this tool called Cauldron, and so I love it because it's super accessible. It's out of the box accessible on the web. And I mean, one of my first thoughts is that for OSPOs that are just looking to even gain some bearing on value, that there could be a Cauldron. Can we do this, Georg? Like a Cauldron dashboard? Is that possible? Is that a thing?
Yes, we can create Cauldron dashboards. And I think Manrika showed this at the CHAOSScon. So maybe that's where you got the idea from, that you can build the dashboard, have all the visualizations, descriptions, and everything. And then you export it and you can share it with others. And when they pull in the data for their own projects, they can load that dashboard, that visualization piece into their own Cauldron. And that is a nice way of sharing ways to have metrics and visualizations.
No, yeah, I 100% would love to be at a place where it's like, here is both an example, and then here is the button to click to export the example. And then, yes, you do need to set up your own version. That's cool. Go click that button and then load it and get going. Like a tutorial level of that. Like, I think that's a wonderful goal to set.
It clears that first bar of actually seeing some of these metrics as meaningful to your own particular context.
Yeah. Good. No, that's fun. That's, it's kind of like the vision I felt like I needed. You know, when you get a little too deep in GitHub issues and kind of lose the forest, if you will.
Yeah, that would be great.
That'd be sweet. Okay, so getting back into the forest, we have some, something worth celebrating. When I joined Value Group a month ago, the 0 issues, 0 pull requests, very, very, very quiet. We have 4 and 4, which means there's stuff in progress, which means yay! Thanks everybody. Actually, and huge thank you to Georg. You've been very, very thoughtful and taking time on comments and suggestions, which I appreciate. Been a little slow at reviewing you know, I think I'm trying to hold a lot of space for everybody right now. Like, it's been a pretty wild month in the world. And I
Oh,
haven't,
yeah, no worries.
yeah, I haven't prioritized this, but I wanted, and I think it's also more valuable if we all like walk through it together. So first one up, there was an existing metric that we, you know, soft archives, if you will, when I did the initial reorganization of it. And based on really thoughtful discussions with Georg and Venia and Dylan, the people that started SCMS, wanted to bring that back into the fold. Georg did a review of it, and it was mostly structural changes that I needed to keep in mind. I made too many headers and didn't quite frame the so, you know, the very short version of the social currency metric system in my head, you know, I'm working under the premise it needs to go back in because it was already approved, and that's great. For me, like from an industry standpoint, it's social listening, which is a very common practice in organizations of usually a larger size. What I think it adds on top is also like a methodology to analyzing to self-analysis and improvement based on the data. So that's really fascinating. But this one also, I'll be honest and say it confused me a bit just because it's such an expert level tutorial on how to do something as opposed to just like a simple raw metric, if you will. So yeah, not a bad or good thing. Just like for me, as I'm trying to pattern match and learn how we do things in CHAOSS, it definitely stood out as like, this is deep. What were you gonna add, Kurt?
I just wanted to add that I had conversations with 2 companies in the last 2-3 weeks, and I brought up social currency metric system because they dropped the idea of, hey, we want sentiment as part of the metrics that we would love, but we have no idea how to go about this. And I introduced them to the social currency metric system, and their eyes just lit up and they saw the possibilities that this can provide to have metrics around how communities are doing and the perception of the community. For these companies, it was especially what are the people in this space thinking, and what are the strategies, what strategies can we develop to change that thinking? So they're really looking at this from a perspective. One of the companies is a very large player in an open source project. I don't want to reveal who I talked to, but they are the largest user of that software. And it's the software is WordPress. And they just want to know, what is the WordPress community thinking about us as a company, for many reasons. And one of them is the technical people who are involved in the projects are not the ones who would be our customers, but they are consulting, they are being asked by their friends, by their family, by their peers, where should we go to have a WordPress website? And that was a very powerful story that I heard for how they want to use social currency metric system and how that could be applied. And the value, to tie that back into the value component, is it closes a gap between saying we need to grow our technology brand to we are driving sales in our product team, and being able to having social currency metric system can bridge that gap a little bit more than right now. It's a little disjointed, that story.
Very cool. All right. So, well, one of these says, anyone have questions or comments, or we're curious to understand more? Yeah.
I do. So Matt, you had pointed out the complexity. So 2 things. One, Georg, thank you for that. And that's nice to hear that people have an interest in this. One of the things that we're trying to constantly balance in the CHAOSS project is an overwhelmingness as printed in a metric. And just the metric trying to get its point across as simply as possible. So there, I hear fairly regularly, and I'm probably guessing Georg has heard this too, that I go and I take a look at the metrics, whatever those might be, and they're very difficult to understand.
Yeah.
They're long and extensive, and it's a commitment to read the metric, and actually it's like an academic paper sometimes. And so over the years, we have actually worked to scale that back to make the metrics more accessible, to quickly get your head around what the metric is, um, without full descriptions of how to deploy the metric. I mean, for a while, we actually had like, step one, download this tool. Step two, get a
Oh
GitHub
wow.
key.
Yeah,
Step four, and we were like, this is ridiculous. And so, Gary, did you have a comment? You can chime in. I don't hold the floor here. So
The first couple metrics, we add SQL statements describing the schema, all of that.
So it's funny you mentioned that because my first attempted PR to Bitergia in like 2015 was all the SQL syntax I was using to try to query information out of it, because I'm like, you have a great tool that's completely useless to peers of mine because you're not telling people how to use it. But that's exceptionally tricky in this situation because we're like, yeah, it's not clear to me like the sort of content hierarchy of like raw pieces versus aggregated pieces versus best practices, so like kind of the stream I think of. Um, but yeah, in this case, like I was really working from the premise that like I did something that didn't make sense for the program overall by removing it, and to add it back in with enough context that's valuable. So like these headers are like hopefully very short and concrete and speak to an audience from the beginning, like social listening plus this thing. In the implementation, it requires the collection of community comments, the definition of codecs, and ongoing review. And I checked this with some friends that might actually implement it in the DevRel space. And they're like, yeah, I know what you're saying there. So like it hit the minimum of like legibility. But yeah, this thing is still beastly. So I guess I didn't know.
I would probably, can you scroll down just a little bit more?
Yeah.
So in terms of the visualization, where, Georg, is that Grimoire Lab at all? I mean, that doesn't look like Grimoire Lab.
No, this looks like this is a Google Docs using Studio, according to the watermark, and then the bottom one, this is an Airtable that they link to at the bottom, so that's kind of nice.
Okay.
So yeah, what were you thinking?
Is Grimoire Lab looking at this at all, Georg? Because I know that there's a Google Summer of Code relationship. So
yes, there will be a Google Summer of Code student who we're inviting to work on this.
Okay, it's part of connection with Grimoire Lab.
Correct. So the rationale is that you can build out a social currency metric system with any tool you like, but you need to get the data. And Grimoire Lab already solves getting the data from 30 different data sources. Okay. And what this Google Summer of Code project is to pull the data from the database, have the UI, basically this Airtable visualization that is number 2 for the tagging, and then also the reporting. So that is building on top of Grimoire Lab to have the social currency metric system. Probably, I imagine it's going to be a separate service or a separate tool running on the same database.
Okay, but it would be kind of available in that Grimoire Lab world. Okay.
Yes.
Then I start to have, it's not that I didn't have an interest, but part of what I'm always trying to do on any of these metrics is have them connected to something, right? Something.
Yeah, it's not be like dangling. Yeah.
It comes out of CHAOSS, and it's not perfect yet, but we're getting there. So my recommendation for this metric would probably be revise and resubmit to reduce the amount of description. That would be my recommendation.
I agree with the revise and resubmit. Would it be okay to delay this until after or during Google Summer of Code, make that part of the project? Because we will need documentation of how to use the tool that we're building. And so a lot of the detail that is in here right now can move over. And I would
see.
like to keep it here central because that is what the Google Summer of Code student saw and will be using as the baseline for the project.
Folder, and then we can pull it out of this.
Yes, I would love to, as you said, reduce it, but we need a new space to document all the detailed steps and everything. And I think the documentation of this new tool would be ideal for doing that.
Okay. Can you add that in the PR?
Yeah, so I want to make sure sorry, wow, so many pull requests.
You just want to keep it in the notes, Georg.
Yeah, let's keep it in the notes, and I have it in my head also as we spin up the Google Summer of Code project to make sure that is part of the expectations.
Sure. So I just want to make sure I'm following. So the current state is like it's in an archive folder with a header that says basically this is not a metric that makes sense to value. What this PR does is brings it back out of the archive with a little bit more context. So I'm wondering if, yeah, I'm fine either way. I just want to make sure, like, is it helpful to pull it out of that archived context into, like, still overly elaborate, but a metric in the folder, and then we'll take the next step after that through another issue? Because I'm thinking, like, open a new issue to simplify SCMS, merge this PR, and then we can take that step further when we've got the Google Summer of Code person.
Yeah, I think you got it. Let's make the improvements that we have right now, and then have a new issue for the Google Summer of Code project to simplify it even more. But in the meantime, I think it would be good to just have this back in with all the other metrics and start focusing on the other metrics.
I'm gonna write it out, and also if you'd rather it stay open for a while too, Matt, like I'm down for that. I'm just want to make sure we're like I'm helping it be
What
clear where it's at.
Unarchiving it, what is that? I didn't follow that step.
Yeah, so that's where if we look at the current repository under metrics, and this was like the, you know,
I remember.
yeah, but like most of the current metrics are in an archived folder, and
So
then
if you click the currency one, right? What is that?
yeah. So I even put a note that's, you know, pretty respectfully but bluntly says like this isn't practical as written because it's more a tutorial than than like a clear metric. And like based on what we've all talked about, like it seems more appropriate to say like this is a valued metric and to put it in the top level folder here next to project popularity.
So if you go back to archived
mm-hmm.
and you click on the metric, is this the text that's in the pull request right now?
Yeah, so sorry,
No.
this top header?
Just the whole thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. So anything that looks really long, like that's from here, and I just copied it word for word over and added some clarification.
Okay. Gotcha. So this is the text of the PR.
Yeah, this was the, well, no, this was the official metric that, you know, minus this header, this archive note. This was the official metric merged in before my time.
I got
in all its glory. If we take a look at the current PR, and if you kind of note the sections in green here, so I removed the archive, the red section, and in green, kind of instead of the description being this kind of very heady, very smart introduction to this concept. I try to give it just like a bit more of a layman.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
And then
I got you.
similarly, like this is condensed. So this is all original stuff in Objective. And then the other green edition, the SCMS, requires like clarifying like what does it actually require to do this in the implementation. Everything else is identical, and I'm with you 100% on simplifying it. But I'm seeing this PR as more of like a bump forward, and definitely not a conclusion.
A bump forward in the sense that it's providing the green mark text, which is the kind of a condensed way of saying what might be below or what might be appropriate in this section.
I'd say, yeah, the industry and lacking a PhD perspective that's kind of the category I put myself in.
So then if this is merged, it just goes back into that markdown in the archive. I see.
Yeah, exactly. Because, yeah, it's going to migrate from archived into metrics /.
Gotcha.
Does that make
Okay, so
more?
top level metric with this new text that you've added, but it's still not a metric ready for release.
I think it's already been released.
This metric was already released.
Yeah, that's the thing. So like,
right now, like I also written in the agenda section a focus area, because previously we had a different focus area that was released under that area. Now it's archived and needs a reframing or reshaping. But I'm still stuck like what directions we are taking. We have the goal, but we don't have the focus area. Okay, if I propose 2 or 3 metrics, where should I put them or categorize them, or they'll be just a list of metrics in the value group? Or
yeah, this is where I get lost as well. Like, what is the point of a focus area? Like, the value group is its own focus area. It's an entire category in and of itself. Like, why do we need this sub specification that's not adding any specific value?
I can speak to the history if you like.
Sure. Yeah.
So focus areas are an invention we came up with in the diversity and inclusion working group. And as we were working through diversity and inclusion issues, Emma Irvin brought in the findings from a research she did with Mozilla on what does it take to have inclusive projects. And she had 5 or 7 areas like leadership, events, governance, all these areas, and those were focus areas, which we then developed metrics for. So diversity inclusion was the working group, but within that we had multiple different ways of looking at diversity inclusion, and those were focus areas.
Sure. Yeah. But
that's
so is now
same,
all working groups need focus areas, or things are disorganized? Because D&I to me is a much more complex topic, and right now we have exactly 2 metrics.
There has been no, I'd say, requirement that you have to have focus areas.
Okay.
And so to Georg, he hit it right on. Sometimes in evolution, say we're looking at issues or pull requests, like sometimes they break out pretty clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So my thinking was on this, like, okay, are we thinking from a individual's perspective to have the metrics in that area, or are we thinking from a community perspective to have the value metrics from that area? Are we thinking from a DevOps perspective to have the value from that perspective? Like, those categorization was helpful to put the metrics in those areas. That was my only goal for like considering where should I consider social currency metric. Is it from an individual perspective? Is it from a community perspective? Is it for a company perspective? Like, that's where I was getting stuck. My head trying to frame out the things.
Yeah, I hear you. I proposed this one. I just closed it moments ago of a focus area. If you like to look through, and I mean, Jörg, Matt, and Venia added quite a lot of conversation. think Venia, I'll do my best to do it justice. It's a really good read. But in a nutshell, it's kind of a false dichotomy to say that a metric is either valuable to a community or to an individual, similarly to an individual to a company. And we could offer some sort of matrix, like a self-assessment matrix, like she's proposing, which I'm open to. But for me, I'm still I'm fully down for that classification, and I welcome an issue exploring that, Vinod. But for me, we're just not doing the basic thing of getting value metrics that are valuable to organizations into this repo. And that's far more of a concern to me than how we continue to categorize them after we have them.
I think that's fair.
I would second that proposal to let's get the metrics in and worry about grouping them later.
But at the same time, I really respect what you're saying, that like it's important to understand an audience and to help our audience understand when a metric is useful. Yeah, and if you, it's also something I think we're going to take some tries at focus areas through a conversation and realize, you know what, that doesn't actually work. That's okay too. But I would ask that you kind of open that issue, start a new thread on that conversation. If you have an idea. So, and then the rest of our energy should be like, let's get the stuff that works and get it in there.
Agreed.
Cool, thanks. Alrighty, good. I think we hit a decent place on that one. I'm gonna keep closing and reopening the exact same PRs. Is that sufficient? And that's a metric of value. No.
I think
Oh, please.
I want to my opinion. I think the focus area we can divide to four area. Individual is okay. I think you write it down, and I think organization we can separate to two area. One is for example the foundation, Linux Foundation, Apache Foundation, and the other is I think is a company. They have different goals. The company is much more to want win in the commercial. We want to get more money, and the foundation, a foundation, they want to their how to say it. The value is to spread their how to say, sprint, and I think it can. I think focus area can the organization we can separate in two different organizations because they have different goals.
Yeah, I see your point, and I think it's worth continuing. Like, can you open an issue to explore that? I think that's an interesting conversation starter.
Okay.
I think I'll end up pulling in. Yeah, it's a great point, and that's exactly what we're trying to get to, King. So it'd be great. Please open an issue, and let's discuss it further.
Okay.
Yeah, great point though. I think and even different companies will have both ends ultimately, like trying to get more visibility versus trying to get more money out of a community effort. Like this is where I think we're gonna tie ourselves in very useful knots, but the conversations need to happen. So thanks for suggesting that. Cool, okay, so just to wrap this up, this is good step forward to unarchive. The metric will need simplification. Here's a small step forward and further work through Google Summer Code collaboration. Cool. All right, and Georg, no rush, but I ask you to re-review when you get a chance.
All right.
Cool. Moving along, that's the other metric that was proposed. This was one I wrote up again before it was committer, so it needs some cleaning up. That Georg added a bunch of comments for me to clean up, but. So the premise is share a voice, which valid or not is a very common way companies kind of talk about a measurable comparison of impact from their organization versus another. And I can do some work to clarify the description that it's not just like a vague comparison, but it is ultimately like the most common practice I've seen. There are companies like BuzzSumo, Fixate, Sprinkler, they all have paid for products for share of voice with the idea that, you know, you have some measurable amount of audience on the social platforms that they measure, and they can say like, you have this much of the share of voice around, say, big data was a big one when I was actually using this. We could consider this in Kubernetes right now. So like, who has the most, or open source actually, as like, who has the mind share of open source? Like share of voice is an attempt at measuring like how much top of funnel awareness you have around a topic. I offer, this is from a tool that I used to do so back in the day. And like you show like the relative growth to your competitors in a given category.
Could you give me an example of what is the metadata that's used to produce this?
Definitely, it'd be like Twitter traffic, blog posts about a given topic, and message forums. So if we attempted to say like, you know, does the Linux, no, like, I'm trying to think of a good one that's not too close to home. Like, so what's the share of voice around Linux package managers? Like, is Flatpak trending as the top one, or is Snap and Canonical trending versus others? And you could measure each of them across a standard set of conversation on different social platforms, and use Google search traffic to grab the amount of conversations happening through other sorts of posts. And then you
voice of the project, because the way you just kind of described it. So like, what are the, say, different package managers?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would imagine if you go back up a little bit, that those bar charts that you were showing,
yeah,
the 54% is package manager A, 17% at the top bar, 17% is package manager B, and so on and so forth. And then exactly. That has shifted, right? So the conversation package manager B is now getting more, it's being talked about more, is the way I understand that.
Yeah, it's being talked about more, exactly, based on whatever. So you do need a baseline. So it's like before interacting, like before trying to do something effective, measure like how much share of voice is, like, it feels repetitive to define things with the term, but like, what is your share of voice relative to your top 3 or 4 competitors?
Okay.
And when you do activities over the next number of months, like, does it have an impact on the share of voice?
Okay. And is shared voice, is that an industry phrase?
That was something I was specifically asking Lawrence about. That's why I had like a follow-up call with him. And he agreed that it is an industry term. Like if I search share of voice measurement.
I've heard it before as well.
Okay.
Like we'll have Sprout Social, Brand Watch, Talk. Like we'll have all these. It is a very marketing centric term, but I also think marketing holds budget, therefore it's relevant to our measure.
Okay. So, okay, that makes sense. Sorry for asking questions here, but
oh no, that's actually, it's ideal. Thank you for asking questions.
The share. So if you scroll back down to that, I like the bar charts, and so there's no real sharing that's occurring, right? It's what percentage of of the conversation do I own, basically.
Exactly. It's very much like the share is like there's a zero sum pie of awareness.
So, it's a share that I own, not a sharing that I have with my competitors.
Yeah. Oh, I do kind of like the term. It does sound friendlier than it actually is. It's like, how can I kill my competitors in this given category?
Okay. And then
So
go ahead.
when you asked about sharing, what were you thinking, Matt?
Well, sharing means like if there's the 5 of us on here, we all collectively create a unified voice.
Mm.
Like there's a chaos, I would say, produces a shared, in the collaborative sense, a shared voice. That what comes out of chaos is a collection of what Matt B has to say, what Vinod has to say, what you have to say, what King has to say, and it's we're all in this together.
I love the message, and it's completely the opposite. It's like, yeah, how can I dominate my competitors? And it's not something like I'll say like I'm morally aligned with, but it is an interesting measurement.
Uh, how is it
So
different from the popularity? Like,
Great question.
uh,
Let's look at popularity and see.
Jared, did you have a comment too while that's coming up? Or
I was just thinking on chaos, if we could just have chaos as one of the organizations that we're looking at in that bar chart.
Yeah, I
To
can.
see in open source and metrics, what is chaos's share of voice?
Mm. So
and that could be our shared. Sorry.
no, that's great. That's great. Like it, I take your feedback there. Like be, label your image. So label the image so that people can follow the example is a good tip in for life when using data. But to answer your question, Vinod, it's I mean, for one, it's a complete metric. Like this is an idea that I don't know why it's was merged in its current format. It needs more work. Um, but like that aside, like how would a share of voice? So share of voice reminds me more of like SCMS, which it's a methodology to using the raw metric. The raw metric being like the monotonic, like how many times have you been talked about this month? That's just like that growing number. Okay, cool. That on its own is valueless. But if I find something of value to compare it to, which is this competitive angle, now I have something that a company would pay me to do. Um, so kind of two separate things. One, like this needs completion. But that said, there is the raw part of this that's good. And it does bring up the question of like the share of voice idea is kind of layered on top of popularity, or it could be considered to be, but it is its kind of own distinct way of conceptualizing value.
can I summarize it as a like popularity in comparison with something? Share is a share of voice.
Popularity in comparison to something. Yeah, as measured over time.
Yes.
so, can you go back to share voice? And again, go back to the bar. I mean, I know I can do it too, but
Oh, you're good. Yeah, I'm sharing.
share a voice. So when I look at those bar charts,
Oh,
I think I can. I mean, the reason that I, as a human in the world, would care about this is one, is if, as Georg pointed out, like we're the chaos project and we want to understand basically how big our bar is when taking a look at open source community health. We want to understand how much of a voice we have. And if that voice is changing, so like for example, if we went from 54% to 17%, that would tell me something. I'm not quite
yeah.
sure.
Either direction would make a huge impact,
Yep.
right? Because and it would be something where like you kind of have to know like what are other standards that are trying to define
Yes.
community metrics. So like it immediately gives you that mindset of like understanding your target market.
Yep.
That's what I like about it. But you know, to Vinod's point, it's not itself a raw metric. It's a synthetic comparative. Um,
And I think it would also be useful, like in your example, Matt, of, well, if we talk about like, say, package managers,
yeah.
if I'm an organization looking at using different package managers, that if I was using package manager A and they were 54% and over time they're dipping down to 17%, that would tell me I'd probably want to look under the hood a little bit more as to have companies left
Yeah.
contributions to that 1A, have companies entered into the market, say on that kind of orangey bar,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so I think that could be interesting as well. So I think there's a couple different contexts I can see as to why that visual would be interesting. One is internal project. I want to know about my project and basically how much market share I have based on this metric. And then the other is before I invest in the use of a tool, if I see that tool dipping, I may want to look a little bit more deeply.
So what you're describing, Matt, to me is like how we would use the metric. It doesn't sound like it's a criticism of the metric itself, but to have a more holistic view and construct a story around what the metric is telling us and pulling in additional data points to have a complete picture.
Well, and I think, can't that sit in the objectives of the metric? That's often where we put this type of story.
Okay. I can't. Okay.
It's just German prey, yeah.
Yeah. It just rolls off the tongue.
Years, and it will. So the objectives is often like, why do we even need this metric? Like, why do we need this?
To assess.
So while you're doing that, thank you for getting that in there.
Yeah.
I know we only have a few left. Can I ask a question about the current metric release?
Can we pause on that just to wrap up on this? Because I had just, while it's fresh in the mind, Kevin threw out I'm not sure this is a metric. This feels more like describing methods of comparison. I don't understand how to analyze that when I thinking about SCMS, for example. Again, like I'm just looking for pattern matching right now. I'm like, it doesn't seem any more complex or less.
It feels like a metric to me, the way that we've walked through it here.
Okay.
Get that bar visual.
Yeah.
I mean, that's telling me something. That's providing, we always use the word transparency, but that's giving me transparency on what's going on.
Okay.
I have a thought. What Kevin is referring to sounds to me like our ongoing conversation about simple and complex metrics, about basic and composite metrics.
Yeah.
So whereas this share of voice or whatever the metric is we're looking at right now, the
definition of composite.
Yeah. So I think what Kevin is saying, the metric is number of comments,
right?
And then you filter them based or you categorize them based on who owns that comment or who was in that comment. Yeah. And then share of voice is just the visualization on top of that raw number metric where you then have the percentages. And so this is something we have talked about in CHAOSS for a long time, and we don't have a really good solution about when do we call it a metric, when do we call it a filter, when do we call it a visualization, and we're going back and forth on this. And so I think that is what Kevin is talking about here, that to him it feels more like a visualization on top of the raw data.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely, okay, that makes sense in context, and I totally respect it. It's a question I have myself kind of regularly, like again, gleaning by example, it's like it seems okay to have composite and raw metrics side by side in the org. I would love more, maybe like a touch of metadata there that makes it clear, like this is something you measure and doesn't have an opinion yet. This other way is an opinionated view that we consider a composite metric. Like that differentiation or that distinction is something I have to do in my job. So any guidance is very helpful. Cool. Sorry, I didn't. We've got a little bit, and hopefully people can hang out for a minute. What did you want to ask, Matt?
Well, I guess I have two things now. One, I agree with that. The composite versus raw, or composite versus atomic. We've talked about it for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gotten in the way of releasing metrics and providing value, like whether we only do atomic or only do composite. So, and in fact, I think certain working groups are a little bit more inclined towards atomic metrics or these raw metrics, and certain working groups may be inclined to more composite metrics. So I don't know that it makes much difference to me personally. So, and then I guess my last question was just as we have the release, and I'm sorry if we've talked about this before, but if we have the release, I guess another meeting may be joining here. That's Carter. So we may want to pick this up next week or in 2 weeks, but you know, the release, like on the web page, we have those 5 metrics that are under value. You know what I'm talking about? Is there? Yeah. Hi, Sean. Hi, Carter. We're just wrapping up the value working group here for a second. So give us just a second. All right. Do we have a plan on removing those? Okay.
The intention is not to remove them based on what we last talked about. It was more to find a way to merge them back in with whatever necessary context. If you want to follow up, I'm happy to one-on-one or in a special meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
For the next meeting.
Thanks all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, gang.